People who switch sides in a highly divided community, political, religious, pizza-topping debate. What happened that changed your mind? How did it go? I used to be dead set against marijuana legalization. Why do we need another legal intoxicant when the one we already have causes so much harm? This will allow easier access for underage users. Will lead to an overall increase in drug use. Blah. Blah. I then came to a pretty sudden realization that in jurisdictions where marijuana has been legalized, there has been a significant harm reduction and drop in other illegal drug uses, e.g. meth. Opiate users report switching to legal pot. Underage use has not spiked. And the numbers of people who say they are drug users has not increased. In the end, actual data ruined my previous certainty about what I thought I knew. Now I just need a flip-flop t-shirt. I used to be an active member of my church. I'd experienced a near-death experience when I was a child and was reaching out to try to better understand what happens to a person when they die. One thing my youth pastor was adamant about was that D&D was a gateway for the devil. He used to talk about his younger days when he was a teen and he tried D&D and how the devil would reach through him and act through him and his friends. He says he stopped when the devil tricked him into thinking his friend was a demon. And he tried to kill his friend. My brother was getting into D&D at this time. So this was particularly worrisome. It led to a great deal of fighting between me and my brother. Over time I kept watching for signs of the devil in my brother and never really found any. I started taking a closer look at the books and trying to suss out what the threat was. But couldn't find one. Then I started pressing my youth pastor and people who knew him for more information. Eventually my youth pastor slipped up and mentioned that he'd frequently drop acid while playing D&D. Suddenly everything made a lot more sense. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up. For all the people asking why D&D was considered evil in the first place. This was right in the middle of Patricia pulling and bad. She certainly had a strong impact on how my quiet little mountain town viewed such things. GMOs. I used to feel that they were unnatural and therefore bad. After getting a chemistry degree and spending a lot of my personal time studying food science, as well as working on farms and gardening, I think that genetic solutions to farming can be great. I still think that big farming is rife with horrible practices. And some companies exploit GMOs and patents on GMOs to the detriment of humanity. But I can no longer subscribe to the GMOs equals evil point of view. I hate Daniel Craig as Bond. Brosnan had always been the perfect Bond in my mind. Probably because I grew up with him. I refused to watch all movies with Craig until I saw him in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I liked that so much that I gave his Bond movies a chance. Now he's my favorite by a distance. I used to think it was reasonable to expect men to put the toilet seat up and down as needed. Then somebody on Reddit posted a long and heartfelt comment about the relative effort expended on lifting and lowering and how it would be more fair if men lifted the seat to use it and women put it back down to use it. I subsequently decided that the best way to keep toilet use fair, aesthetically pleasing, and hygienic and, of course, unlikely to lead to sleepy women falling into the toilet bowl in the middle of the night was for everyone close the lid of the toilet after every use. That way, women have to remember to lift and lower something as well. And the toilet looks nice. And the dog won't drink out of it. And we get extra protection from aerosolized biological waste being flung onto our toothbrushes. The result has mostly been that I think everyone who flushes their toilet without closing the lid first is a barbarian. But the guys I date appreciate my even-handedness. Well, this is not necessarily a huge disease risk. It is possible. Fishing. I used to be a very avid catch and release angler. Fished with some of the best. Was in a few magazines, etc. etc. I started to look a bit closer as to what I was doing. How many fish survive after catching and releasing them, and came to the conclusion that though it's fun for me at the time, it probably wasn't all that much fun for the fish. My regular group of fishing friends who were fun and very talented. Knowledgeable bunch. Mostly conservation-minded guys just couldn't understand my change of heart. I now fished only to keep. Which they though was wrong, but I never over-harvested and always kept to the limits allowed or just a couple for supper. Freezer. Whatever. I'm not sure what changed my mind, but I just started feeling bad about how I was hurting another living being for nothing more than essentially bragging rights and my own pleasure. Cilantro. I absolutely could not stand the soap-like flavor for 20 plus years. Entire stalk slapped on my Thai entrees. It's in the guacamole. Haunted my dreams and damn near ruined Thanksgiving one year. Then one day, like magic, the soapy fog lifted. I have no idea what happened. I absolutely love the stuff now. I've pretty much stopped using Straussy. No, it sounds stupid and small. But the plastic pollution stuff is getting to me and I am not a green type of person at all. So it's a big deal to me if for nothing else than personal growth. As time goes on, And pretty much every time I take out the trash, I'm reminded at how utterly wasteful everything is. Baby steps, I guess. Edit. It's worth mentioning that I've stopped using straws in restaurants and such. I don't use them at home. I used to study chemistry, a real science, and laugh at geologists, fake science. Hated and failed chemistry, and now I am studying geology. It's absolutely fascinating. Definitely a real science. And I really care about the subject matter. I was trapped at home after school. Mom and dad were both dead. And I was looking after my siblings. It was a small community. And I was bored out of my skull. Angry at the world for my crippling responsibility and honestly not being a very good brother. Truth be told. Then the world's most handsome dude moved in next door. Not gonna lie. The initial interest was purely physical. But after some flirting and a bit of back and forth, he started mentioning his politics. Apparently he was kicked out of his last place because of his extremist racial views. Being young, dumb, and in love, I absolutely ate it up. We actually started planning actions that would hopefully lead to a coup. And well, purge is a strong word. Anyway, I stopped thinking so blatantly racist and started actively fighting that shit after he and I got in a fight with my brother. We accidentally killed my sister. Now I'm the headmaster of a prominent boarding school. And try as hard as I can to stamp that sort of thing out when they are still young. I was raised to believe homosexuality was unnatural. I grew up around homophobic people, so I naturally hated gay people myself. The first time I encountered a gay person in public, I laughed and made horrible jokes about how he talked. That's who turned out gay. Toilet paper over or under? I used to be in the DGAF camp until I realized under was Satan's work. Over all the way now. How about fold or scrunch? For years I was scrunch. Now I'm fold. The change occurred when I started Metamucil, so now I'm generally on a 2-wipe plan. It has made it much more obvious how much more economical the fold is. I wonder if I'm actually paying for the Metamucil in reduced TP costs. Okay. Probably not, but I'd love to think I was. I was raised in Norway on the notion that marijuana is just as bad as heroin. Smoking weed was not just a gateway drug. It was the absolute devil, and if you even had one puff you'd soon find yourself in a ditch somewhere. I had my beliefs reinforced when I moved to Canada and saw weed-smoking classmates flunk classes and drop out and generally fail at holding their attention on anything. However, during a public speaking class, one of my classmates toppled my worldview. He was a great guy, funny, yet unsuspecting. I had never seen him argue for anything with passion before. But when he spoke to the class about the history of marijuana in the US and Canada and how it had been demonized due to industrial interests, and then he reinforced it with personal accounts and statistics. I remember the end of his speech so clearly, it was as if I was suddenly seeing myself from the outside. Could I have been wrong about this all along? It didn't set me on a path to smoking weed. But it did make me reevaluate a lot of things in my life. It made me always try to keep an open mind during discussions and arguments. Hard as it can be. Because maybe, just maybe, I might be the one in the wrong. And I must say, the feeling of having your worldview turned upside down is certainly not easy. But it's a refreshing feeling worth pursuing. If you really give an opposing side a chance, you'll find they often make valid points. It's been over a decade since I changed my mind about marijuana. I've tried it a few times since, and I let my family know it's not as terrible as they thought it to be. I do still believe it can damage you long term if you use it too frequently. But I am fully convinced it should not be the super illegal substance it's made out to be. The LDR, a classmate, made me rethink marijuana through a simple speech. I used to be against nuclear power. So I then decided to research it for school, and it turned out it might be the best we've got until renewable resources get further in their development. I don't think it's the best long term. But I don't think it's the devil no more. My parents, who were green wavers during the 70s, are very mad at me for this. Yeah, nuclear is an interesting area and I had a similar experience. Originally being blanket opposed to it as a teenager. It's still terrible for the environment in terms of waste product, since all we can really do is bury it. But it's so goddamn efficient, and once I had read more papers I start to get how. Well, we shouldn't have it long term. It's actually a reasonable stepping stone toward something greener. Edit. For people just showing up. It's been pointed out to me now that we can do other things than bury it, and allow me to point out, as an American, I didn't realize we actually had other options. My government tends to bury it a fake. Edit again. I'd link to things. As some people have asked. But some of y'all already seem to have that pretty well covered. Also, I'm already in my pajamas. Used to be extremely anti-vaccination. Now quite in favor. But changed my mind. I had a baby and had to make that decision for someone other than myself. I dove into the research and did a lot of soul searching. It was really just a problem with ignorance on my part. We are all fully vaccinated now. Edit. Wow, thanks for my first Reddit golds. Guys. The real gold is making sure we are part of the solution. Though. I'm really grateful we woke up and made a good decision for the health of our child and our community. We still get backlash about it from my anti-vax in-laws, so your support means a lot. I used to think programming was dumb and computers were ridiculous for not being more intuitive. Then I spent 11 years working with people and realized they're worse. Now I'm stressed and can't remember how to program anymore. After years and years of doubt, I went to the museum that had a detailed exhibit on evolution and decided that was the last straw and officially left the religion 3 days ago. As a result, I am now being shunned by almost every single person I have known for the last 32 years. A and NBSP edit. Since I'm at work and can't reply to everyone quite yet, here's a few answers to common questions. I was a Jehovah's Witness and now I'm agnostic. No interest in religion. This wasn't the only problem I have with the organization. Once I started researching, I found tons of things I disagree with. I do realize that other religions do believe in evolution. But JWs do not. The museum and exhibit was Evolving Planet at the Field Museum in Chicago. I used to hate country, but then I discovered the banjo and bluegrass, and turns out what I hate is modern country. Sturgill Simpson is an exception. Grew up black in the 90s in an urban setting. Rock and country were white music. Learned the history behind them and learned not to be so dismissive. But outside of a secret love of early Fall Out Boy, I learned about both through GTA. Now, I'm a huge fan of George Strait, Hank Williams Sr., Patsy Cline, and Willie Nelson. I love psychedelic rock. And I'm just getting into dad rock. Since that's all new music to me. I left the Mormon church. I knew there were plenty of problems. But I ignored them until I had my daughter. Decided that I could choose to face the problems head on. But didn't want to make that choice for my daughter. Especially since the church is full of sexism and patriarchy. It went far better than expected. My wife left with me after several months of open conversation. I am happier, healthier and more optimistic about the future than when I was burdened down with that orthodox religion.